Here we are with Anna Kazlauskas, the inventor of the Vana protocol and CEO of Open Data Labs. Anna, welcome to the Defiant. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So you're tackling one of the biggest problems in the current state of the web, which is data ownership. So really excited to learn more about what your solution is like, and where you're seeing the potential is for a better future in data ownership. But maybe we can just start from the very basics of what Vana is and what kind of these two organizations are, like what their differences, and then we can deep dive.
Yeah. So Vana is the first network for user-owned data. So what that means is it's a way for users to kind of own their data, use it throughout applications, contribute to AI models that they jointly own. From a technical perspective, it is a layer one that's designed to work with this like private user-owned data. And one of the most popular applications on Vana is these kind of data DAOs, which basically allow people to pool their data and then create almost like a data set specific token where you've turned data into an asset class. Open Data Labs is the development and research company behind Vana, which is where I am. And then Art, my co-founder, is over at the Vana Foundation, which stewards forward the protocol.
So I'd love to hear more about your background and what led you to start the Vana protocol and Open Data Labs.
Yeah, so I got interested in crypto through mining. So I had been really interested in like central banks. I had worked at the Fed. I had a picture of like Janet Yellen in my high school bedroom because I saw currency as central to everything. And then got to MIT, learned about decentralized currencies, started mining Ethereum, just like found this world of kind of using decentralization and kind of other basically math and computer science to make a system that is owned by many people rather than having to trust any single entity. And what's nice about that is you can build new kinds of systems, right? And so that's how I got into the decentralization side. I then had started doing some kind of AI research, actually through econometrics type research. So I was trying to model data about like people and the economy, get better and better. And then I started looking at more like machine learning techniques. And so started doing research at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab. This was back in like 2017. So really early days of like the attention is all you need paper had come out, which is what underpins ChatGPT, but people hadn't figured out how to use it for generative models yet. And I think working in AI that early on, what I saw was that really the only thing that matters for better AI models is better data, right? And so then the question was kind of like, how do you get the best data set, right? How do you create the best AI models by aggregating the most data? And how might you use like a decentralized system to do that? And so that's kind of the origin story of Vana. And then Art, my co-founder, was in grad school at Harvard when I was doing my undergrad. He's a lawyer by training and used to work in data sales, selling data to some of the big tech companies. And so he had cross-registered for a class at the MIT Media Lab. We started working together on a project, having people label data on their phones as a way to get kind of better data to train AI models with. And the rest is kind of history.
So interesting, and so relevant to what's happening today with AI kind of exploding in kind of mainstream usage and also in crypto. So where are you seeing that the problem is today, and why do you think that decentralization and blockchains can fix it?
Yeah. So from an AI research perspective, one of the number one problems we face today is something that AI researchers call the data wall, where we've actually run out of data to train AI models on, right? So if you look at the leading AI models today, they're trained on like around 15 trillion words or so. And if you look at the whole public internet, which is kind of everything, if you just go and kind of scrape everything that's publicly available, not held by different companies, that is also 15 trillion tokens, right? So we've kind of exhausted all the data that we have available to train on. So if we want to make better AI, we need a way to get more data, right? And one way you can get that is by buying it from companies, right? So like Reddit earns $200 million selling their data. But what a lot of people don't realize is that users have full legal ownership over their data. So in the same way that when you park your car in a parking lot, like the parking lot doesn't own your car, right? You can always go and get it back. When you put your data in a platform, you retain full legal ownership. So you can always go get it back. And so what Vana allows for is for people to basically take their data from walled gardens, where usually it would only be available to the single big tech company who holds it, and make it into kind of a data DAO, where a large group of users are collectivizing around their data, and then they're able to make it available for AI training. So that's on the AI researcher side and kind of the data demand side. But there's also a problem on the user side, right? I think that right now, a lot of people are concerned about AI of like, is AI going to take my job, right? As like, am I going to train an AI and then not even own it, right? And I think there's a lot of fear, but it doesn't come from like AI itself. It comes more from the incentive systems around AI, right? If users were the ones who own the AI that was trained on their data, then I think it's a lot more kind of comfortable for a user, and we can have all powerful, almost like super intelligence, but ensure that it really benefits like a wide group of people.
Does it start by facilitating this process of taking back our data? Because I imagine if I went to Meta today and said, hey, I want my data back, like it's not simple. So how does that process work? Just like to start kind of the journey of like actually, okay, owning my data and hopefully making money off of it.
Yeah. I think that the idea of owning your data can kind of be abstract, right? The idea of data ownership actually has been around in crypto for a really long time, right? Of like, oh yeah, you should own your data. But I think for a lot of users and even for developers, it's like, okay, tactically, what does that mean, right? Like, what is the net new thing I can do that I couldn't do before? And so then why should I use it? And in the case of Vana, it really is about being able to join data DAOs, where you go and you export your data. It depends on the platform, right? So there's a financial data DAO that has people export their Coinbase data. That's just through OAuth. There's something similar for Twitter. There are some other ones like Amazon where you're doing a manual export. And each of those are built by their own teams, right? So we have an accelerator program with a dozen or so data DAOs who are launching actually over the next week or so. And then all of them are kind of focused on a specific data set, right? And some of them, they're really like experts at their data set. The guy who started the LinkedIn data DAO used to work at LinkedIn selling data, right? So he knows both how do you bring data contributors on board? How do you make LinkedIn data as valuable as possible? So yeah, from a user experience perspective, there's like a web application that helps you get your data for a particular data source. There are a few Chrome extensions you can use as well. And over time, I think that people will be kind of creating more and more efficient interfaces for people to be able to easily contribute their data across different data DAOs.
Super interesting. And when you do that and say I take my data from Twitter or X, does that mean that X can't sell my data anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? It's sort of like, hey, like, do they still retain a copy of it, or are they still selling my data? And if so, like, have I just, I don't know, made a copy rather than actually taken it back? And I think one assumption people often make is, hey, every big tech company like Facebook, they've already trained on all Facebook data. But that's actually not the case, right? So because of data regulation, they're not able to train. And so they have their terms of service, right? So depending on what you've agreed to in the terms of service, they can do what they want to your data, but generally they can't get access to de-anonymized private data. There are actually cases, my co-founder Art has seen where a large tech platform is actually buying data from its users by having them export it and send it back of like, oh, give us your message data, even though technically it's sitting in their servers because they're not allowed to train on it. So what's unique about the Vana approach is you can get data sets that not even a big tech company can get access to, right? Like say you wanted access to somebody's like Facebook messages, iMessage, and everything they've written. Like you would need, in that case, Facebook, Apple, and like Google Docs, say, to all collaborate, but they're not going to do that, right? Because they have no incentive to combine that user's data, and they actually likely cannot even do that for regulatory reasons because it would require de-anonymizing the data and pairing it up across platforms.
Okay, super interesting. So you're able to create just maybe more connections between the different data platforms and maybe create like a richer picture of individuals' data.
Exactly. Yeah. A richer picture that's kind of both deeper at the individual data source level and then spreads across these different platforms.
Okay, cool. And then once users go to these data DAOs and export their data and feed it to the DAO or download it to the DAO, I don't know what the right terminology is. Then what comes next? The DAOs go and like negotiate with big tech companies to sell people's data, and what happens?
Yeah. So ultimately, it's up to the DAO, right? And so there are a few different like approaches we've seen. Some of them are focused on like directly selling the data in kind of a classic data sales way. Others are focused on training AI models that then are used and kind of jointly owned by the users overall, right? So the Reddit Data DAO, which has around 140,000 users who've contributed their data, they've trained a model on their data that now they all jointly own. And the model, since it's just trained on Reddit data today, it's mostly just good at shit posting, right? Because it's Reddit data. But over time, you can build kind of more and more complex models. And there's actually a company, Flower AI, which is an AI company that is training AI models across a bunch of the different data DAOs. The last thing I would mention is aggregating data for the purposes of more like negotiation, right? So I think that the genetic data DAO is a good example of this, where 23andMe right now has many users' genetic data, and they're in a tough situation where like their market cap isn't doing very well, and they're kind of the 23andMe, the centralized company. So what the genetic data DAO aims to do is actually have users collectivize around their genetic data, export their 23andMe data, add other valuable healthcare data into it, and then at some point actually buy 23andMe, the company, outright. Right. So their goal is not, hey, let's sell our data. It's actually like, hey, let's take back control using like the collective power of our data. So those are some of the different use cases. And it's all governed by the DAO, right? So when you've contributed to a data DAO, you get back a data set specific token, this kind of data token, which represents your ownership in that data set overall. And that gives you the ability to vote on what you want to happen to your data, and what you're kind of comfortable with, not comfortable with, and any of the other resources that get created from your data as well. What's interesting about Vana is it really is a whole new design space for a builder, right? Now you're not just building financial products. There are also these data transactions that can live in the block space, right? And so you're learning to build like, hey, what's possible with user-owned data, right? And it's a very new primitive. And so, we've been kind of building alongside a bunch of the top data DAOs in the ecosystem for the past few months or so. And then the earliest versions came out earlier this year from a data DAO perspective. Basically progressively rolling things out. I think that what you need to do well as a protocol is like find the right problem that the protocol needs to solve, and then find ways to bring other people in so they can build like really great they're highly incentivized to build great parts of the system, right? So in our case, like we don't build anything out that's kind of specific to a given data set. Like that is all done by the data DAOs. Whereas they're all kind of writing data back to the core Vana, so you can still like use this data across different parts of the ecosystem. So that's one of the kind of technical decisions we've made around splitting that up.
So right now, how many data DAOs are there? And do you have like an estimate of like total participants across all of these DAOs?
Yeah. So right now, all the data DAOs are basically transitioning from being on testnet to being on mainnet. So there are 12 of them who are rolling out right now. And there are about 300 of them who are on testnet and kind of progressively rolling out to mainnet. So 12 of them where you can kind of go explore and try them out now, and then more rolling out over time. And something that I'll call out, like so the Reddit one has like 140,000 users. The 23andMe one, I think, has maybe 3,000 or 4,000 users, but obviously there aren't as many 23andMe users, right? So that can be a relatively high proportion. And you can also use Vana without even joining a data DAO, right? You can just write your data to the network and then use it throughout different like consumer AI applications. And so, there are over 1 million users, and over a few hundred, data DAOs. I actually I joke that I wish I could clone myself and just like build data DAOs all day, because I think it's really fun as a design space for a builder.
How did you go about and or like launching or like going to market, like getting all these people to learn about Vana and create these data DAOs? Like, what was your process there?
Yeah. So early on, we tried to go to market more from an ideological perspective, where we were looking for builders and users who wanted to own their data for purely ideological reasons. What we found is that people rarely adopt products for ideological reasons, right? They want to do something net new that they couldn't do before. And so like now what we found is it's really just about highlighting the opportunity space, and just sort of setting good examples of like, hey, this is what's possible. This is what can be built. I think that early on, a lot of the data DAO builders had heard about Vana in some way, whether it was through one of the first data DAOs or now like friends of friends who started building. Some of them come from a crypto background. Some of them come from more of an AI background. I think the more you've worked with data and kind of interacted with actually the process of training AI models, the more excited about Vana you are, is something we've generally seen. So that is on the like builder side. And then on the user side, I think it's about like making sure that the experience is like fun and welcoming, and not like, you don't want to be told like you should own your data and like almost like talk to of like, oh, like you shouldn't use this. It should be like, hey, what's possible? Like, what's the net new thing you can do? And a lot more just sort of like fun oriented. So yeah, that's some of the learnings on the go-to-market side.
Cool. And then, yeah, what are some of those net new things that are exciting to users?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about being able to jointly own AI models, right? So one, being able to actually like shape an AI model based on your community's beliefs or based on your beliefs and sort of a large group of people. And then also being able to earn as the AI model gets used, right? So one of the guiding use cases we keep in mind is, how do you create an AI model that's owned by 100 million people who all contribute their data from 5 different data sources, right? And what that would get you to is about 450 trillion tokens or trillion words of kind of training data, that then you have like 30 times as much data as any single company. So you can train like a much better AI model. So I think that, yeah, that's an example from the AI research perspective. And then from the user perspective, it's like, I think it's also a great way to onboard a crypto, right? Like you don't need money to come in. You just need your data. Like that is the capital that you're coming in with. So those are some of the use cases I'm excited about. Starting to see some more kind of data trading type use cases where people are building on top of kind of data as an asset class of like, hey, what does a data future look like? What does a data derivative look like? And I think that we're going to start to see more of that, maybe in the next year or so.
A big thing in crypto has been AI agents and all the meme coins related to that. Are you starting to see some use cases related to that space?
Yeah. We're starting to see actually a fair amount of that. There are at least 2 AI agent platforms launching on Vana. There was one that launched yesterday actually called Fleur. And what they allow for is for the agents to access the data so they can get better and better, right? Like what does an AI agent care about? They care about having better data, right? Because that's what allows them to improve. So we're actually seeing that already, and that's been awesome to see. I think that the AI agent space has actually brought in some folks. I think open source AI and crypto have been like a little bit separate, and now they're like starting to get closer and closer, and AI agents has helped with that too.
So you're in the decentralized data space, and obviously that touches that like trains AI, but you could also work with like centralized AI companies who want to buy your data. Like what's your view there? Would you rather like only work with decentralized AI companies, or are you also open, or like is it agnostic?
Yeah, so ultimately it's up to the data DAOs, right? And I think that we have seen both. We've seen cases where they're working with a Web2 company who wants to access the data, and we've also seen cases where they're working with a Web3 company who wants to access the data. In the long run, I think that decentralized AI will win out, right? So it is that decentralized approach that will win. But I think in the short to medium term, data DAOs are taking both options from the perspective of how to best monetize and kind of use some of their data.
Okay, and then what are some of the near-term milestones that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. So one thing I'm really looking forward to in Q1 is actually training an AI model across a bunch of different data DAOs, right? So I think there's been this big question in the AI industry of, can you train an AI model outside of a big tech company that is still very competitive? And so what's cool about the way that Vana is set up is you can actually have like each data DAO train a piece of an AI model, and they're all kind of coming together and creating this more powerful model, right? All the users are contributing their data to make this powerful model. So that is something I'm really looking forward to. Just seeing all of the data DAOs get to really like fully launch, kind of go to market and come to life. There are more and more data DAOs, like honestly, every week at this point. And so just supporting them, getting to see folks who really have a very deep understanding of a particular data set and a very unique view on kind of how they want to implement the data DAO. And there are some more technical things of kind of like getting better with real-time data. From a data tokenomics perspective, I think people are still figuring that out, right? Like how do you map the value of each person's data to like data as an asset. And so that's implemented through proof of contribution on Vana, but there's a lot of innovation happening there right now. And then I'm just thinking about anything else major to highlight. Yeah, I think it's really just the success of the data DAO, seeing them onboarding data, seeing them using that data. And then some of the AI agent and more broadly AI use cases that then get built on top of that data. So mainnet is a layer one, right? So the native gas token is Vana. And then each data DAO has their own like data set specific token. It looks kind of similar to, it's like a cross between maybe like Ethereum and BitTensor tokenomics. So similar to Ethereum, like Ethereum doesn't own a share of all ERC20 tokens, right? And like Vana doesn't own a share of every single dataset token, but really acts as that kind of like coordination layer between all the different data tokens and is also kind of used for staking and as a means of payment. And then for kind of a small fee on every transaction on the network.
Is it used for governance at all?
Yeah. It's also used for governance. And there are kind of two layers of it, right? So each data DAO token is used for governance of that particular data set. And then at the Vana level, there's also kind of governance using the Vana native token.
What is the more long-term vision for Vana? Like, where would you want to see it go if everything goes right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even in a year, we'll have, I'd say like on the scale of tens of millions of people who've contributed their data and really like some of the best data sets in the world, right? Like you will have better data in Vana than what you can get from any centralized company. And what that then turns into is the best AI models, right? And so I think that that's one of the number one pieces that we really track to. There's also this aspect of kind of more broadly, like what's possible in a world where users own their data, right? Like in the same way that when you log into a crypto application with your crypto wallet, like MetaMask, all of your funds are there with you. With Vana, like you log in with your wallet and then all of your data is there with you, right? And that's like really awesome from a developer perspective because now you can build an application that depends on somebody's emails or messages or whatever else you want to train on. You can build hyper-personalized AI agents. You can build in a way that usually you can only build within a big tech company, right? And so what I'm excited about is something I saw with a lot of my AI friends actually graduating is like they went to go work at big tech companies because that's where the data was. And that's like if you wanted to work in AI or you wanted to build these kinds of applications, that's kind of like the trade-off you had to make. But I think that now with Vana, there's a way to just build like really amazing like user-owned data applications that are actually even better than what you can build within a walled garden. So yeah, it's just about opening up that walled garden of data and making it available to developers, truly owned by the users. And that's especially important in this AI native world, right? In a world where so much economic value is created from AI, it is really important that users have that ownership.
Definitely. Do you see yourself competing with like those tech giants with OpenAI and Microsoft and Google, etc.?
Yeah, I think that in the same way that like one could have asked that question about like Ethereum or Bitcoin very early on, right? Like it's like, oh, is like Ethereum a competitor to a big bank? Like sort of, right? But actually now if you look at Ethereum today, it's like the sorts of applications that are getting built were just not really possible within centralized finance, right? So I think that we'll see something similar play out within Vana. I do think there is an aspect of like, yeah, at the end of the day, who has the best AI model, right? And like, we think that the best AI model comes from the best data. And so you can get that in a decentralized way. I think there is an aspect of Vana, which is, breaking the norm, right? Like, a lot of these big tech companies have built their business model on monetizing user data, right? Like, that is how largely the tech industry has been fueled, especially in like the 2010s or so. And now there's a massive shift happening, right? Where like that data is getting even more valuable. And yeah, Vana is like definitely changing things. And we've seen already, I think, there is some, the tech platforms are paying attention. But I think that is also how you know that you're building something that is like actually truly disrupting, how the world works. And so we see it as a good sign, but obviously, it is, it's a very new approach. So we'll see how, it rolls out, from the perspective of these big tech companies in the coming years.
How do you see they're paying attention?
Okay, I think so. I mean, it's for the data DAOs to share specifically, but a few of the data DAOs have gotten different notices from the big tech companies, which I think is like the reason why it's a really good sign is it means that it impacts their economics, right? Like they're thinking, oh, someone else can sell this data set now. And so, yeah, that has been quite cool to see.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's how you know you're making an impact.
Yeah, it is good. And I think too, like, I think they'll come around long term, right? Like to see how user-owned data can be possible. I mean, even like Facebook, they're building threads in like a user-owned way. At least they've said they want to have this federated architecture. And so I think that, yeah, there could be something down the line. I think in the long run, it's in really like everybody's best interest for users to own their data, right? In the same way, like, well, once we had really good property rights, right, then you can have like an economy flourish. You can have, even if you look way back at like agriculture, giving the farmers ownership of their land actually increased like agricultural productivity and generally helped the economy a lot. So in the same way, I think that having those really strong like programmable data ownership rights will just allow for a lot more like economic kind of creation using that data.
So interesting. Anna, thank you so much for joining me. This was fascinating. I'll be really excited to see everything that launches on Vana and all the cool stuff that you create.
Yeah, thanks so much.